Loving Sai Ram and greetings from Prashanti Nilayam. This is my second Musings talk on education. And as I did last time, I intend to reflect on how we should sensitize people everywhere, the young and the youth in particular, to the moral overtones of life so that our Bal Vikas and EHV programs are revitalized, re-energized, and made more relevant to today's situation. I'm not quite sure when I would get down to that particular wavelength, but I do expect to get there in one of my forthcoming talks. Right now, I would like to begin by briefly revisiting the issue of system atrophy, to which I made a brief reference in my last talk. Now, one of the taboos in India handed down from the past was that women could not chant the Vedas. Interestingly, there was no such restriction in Vedic times. The so-called ban seems to have crept in later for reasons I do not know. What probably happened was that, determined to enjoy a privileged status in society, a Western interest group must have maneuvered to see that very few people got access to and master the Vedas. Such knowledge monopoly still prevails, shutting out others. For example, a few big players in the pharma industry managed to keep out a very large number of medium-sized entrepreneurs via the clever manipulation of patent laws. Here, control of the market is the objective. Elsewhere, a small group of people dominate and control the lives of a large number of people in some manner or the other, as has happened in the past in the case of slavery and as still happens in the case of bonded labor. Likewise, extremists and fundamentalists of various hues seize, using money or weapons or both, control and exercise domination. Vedic monopoly was just version 1.0 of a tendency to preserve exclusivity, a tendency that exists to this day. Now, although tradition had its own bans and held sway for hundreds of years, and maybe even a millennium or two, Swami completely ignored them. He not only allowed women to chant the Vedas, but said that anyone could chant the Vedas and at any time, provided they were sincere about it. The point I am making is that Swami retained the best of old tradition, which was the chanting, and threw out the arbitrary ban. This is the way to move forward and not throw the baby with the bath water, as is often done in the name of progress these days. I thought the point is sufficiently important to deserve special mention because there are some who seem to imagine that all traditional values have little place in a world that is globalized. I am not making this up. I have seen letters to the editor echoing such views during debates on which way our economy should go and whether values have any place at all in our society. The idea that values have been wiped out by globalization is pure nonsense. And frankly, it is amazing how stupid people can be at times. One of the problems confronting today's society is how complex it has become. Actually, it is we humans who have managed to make it so. And one reason for this happening is the rapid growth of technology and the impact it has made on all of us, both at the individual level as well as the collective level. As one writer noted recently, humans are very good at building complex systems, but are very poor in managing them. It must be said that complexification is neither new nor necessarily bad, and becomes inevitable when many entities enter to make up a system. I am sure you are foxed by that remark, and so let me explain what I mean. Take a look at the stars in the sky. For many thousands of years, people on earth kept wondering about stars And we all know the nursery rhyme starting with the words, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." I brought in stars because nowadays we no longer have to wonder what stars are all about. In fact, we know a great deal about stars, including how they are born, how they have rebirths, and what their ultimate state is, etc. All that understanding has been possible because stars are basically simple systems. The simplest star, for example, is nothing but a huge gas ball with just protons and electrons flying around randomly and at very high speeds. By the way, such stars were the first to appear in the universe, that is to say about 12 billion or so years ago. Though the physics of stars is a bit complicated, the kind of star I just described is actually very simple. That is why much progress has been possible in stellar physics, even though the stars themselves are far, far away. However, when the system becomes complex, the scientific analysis becomes really tough. Lord Martin Rees, a famous British astrophysicist, says that compared to stars, a frog, common frog, is a very complex system and quite difficult to deal with at the level of detail we are able to achieve in the case of stars. I am sure you did not know that. With that preamble, let me get back to human society, which is something we humans have created. If a frog is complicated, then clearly a human society ought to be indescribably complex, which in fact it is. There is an easy way of appreciating what I have just said. Recently, the distinguished scientist Francis Collins, who headed the Human Genome Project and is now involved with the mapping of neural connectivity of the human brain, made this remark. He said, "The human brain is the most complex entity in the entire universe." Imagine that. Let us now take this remark of Collins a few steps further. Every human brain resides in a human body, which therefore makes the body far more complex than the brain itself. And humanity today is made up of about 7 billion of these complex beings running around and doing their own things as they wish. In other words, human society is made up of 7 billion basic complex entities, each one with a mind that can waver in all sorts of ways, unless the mind learns to regulate itself. But that's not happening because everyone feels that he or she must have the right to do what he or she wants and when they please and how they please. That is the unimaginably problem that human society represents. And when we cannot understand the complexity of a frog, how on earth can we hope to grapple with the infinitely complex situation I've just described? But believe it or not, it is possible to grapple with such a complex situation, provided we have faith in our ancestors and take some of grandma's medicine seriously. What I mean is the following. Although the individual human being is extremely complex as a biological system, and society is hugely so because it's made up of millions of humans, all the societal problems we face arise ultimately in the minds of individuals who are vulnerable. And it takes only 6 distinct types of viruses to infect the mind. Remember Kama, Krodha and all the rest of them that Swami used to talk about so often? They operate cunningly to make the lives of all of us utterly miserable. And they can do it in billions of ways too. That is how we end up with so many complexities. We hardly realize how, for example, greed, selfishness and self-interest quietly create complications without our being aware that it is they that do so. Here's a simple example. I'm told that the US tax code has about 4 million words and is several times the size of the Bible. Wow. Let me make it absolutely clear that I am not mentioning this by way of deriding the United States. I am second to none in my deep admiration for the many good things America has taught humanity, especially in the area of organizing and managing creativity on a large scale, and also about professionalism, information technology, and so on. Further, Americans themselves comment ruefully on their tax code. No wonder. In 2010, the tax rule book, had about 72,000 pages. No, I'm not kidding. The point I'm trying to make is that the US tax code became monstrously complicated because so many exceptions had to be built in to accommodate innumerable vested interests with their own self-interest and selfishness. With such a tax code, I wonder why the people of America don't turn into sannyasis. In India too, we had nightmarish laws relating to income tax, customs and excise duty and so on. But I gather that a good many of them have recently been made much simpler. That said, there are still too many laws in all countries, and over 90% of them are complex enough for tricksters to get away via shady practices. More seriously, all regulations begin with the noble idea of making laws so tight that people are unable to cheat. However, when the law gets packed with too many tight clauses, one soon ends up in a situation where a subclause here contradicts a subclause elsewhere and so on. And that opens up loopholes which clever lawyers know how to exploit, and that is how tax planning is born. You get the general idea, I suppose. The more complex the laws, the easier it is for lawyers to take their clients through gaping holes, enabling tax avoidance to get the respectable status of tax planning. Tax avoidance is cheating, tax planning is being smart. That's the difference. But both really mean the same in practice. The poor and the innocent are totally ignorant about these fine points, and while trying to be honest, they often end up paying penalties for some silly violation or the other. Now, some of you may complain that once again I am drifting from spirituality to mundane things of life. However, here I am on strong grounds because Swami has explicitly said, not once but many times, that everything in life is spiritual. This is so important a point that I intend to revisit in detail later, but for now, let me explain in brief why Swami said everything is spiritual. The reason is simple. If you think carefully, life is nothing but a sequence of actions. Sit back for a moment and reflect carefully on what all you do from the moment you get up to the moment when you hit the sack, as they say. You will realize that all of us are always doing something or the other and involve actions that bring into play the body, the sense organs, and of course the mind. Next, as Swami frequently stressed, all actions are performed in this world. They relate to this world, and most of the time they also arise out of things happening in this world. In other words, actions in the world we live in are tied together in innumerable ways. For example, if you are walking in a field and you happen to see a snake, this happens often here in India, especially during the cultivation season, you would naturally try to escape from the snake. The sequence of events, starting with the sighting of the reptile to escaping from it, all represent actions related to and taking place in the world. Fine. But where does spirituality enter into this? That's what Swami has explained so beautifully. Basically, he says that just because there are snakes, we cannot go around killing all the snakes recklessly. By the way, a few decades ago, they did precisely this in one of the districts in South India. And guess what happened? When the rice crop was ready to be harvested, they found there was not much rice left to harvest. Where did the rice disappear? Well, most of it had been eaten by field rats. So, the snakes were actually keeping the rats in check. That is balance in nature. Similarly, in China, where they nearly exterminated birds because they thought it was a menace to crops. They found that the insects which the birds ate, along with some of the grain of course, now multiplied and caused extensive damage to crops. Once again, you see how man can interfere with ecodynamics. In other words, there are many forces at play in the ecosystems, and we humans, who are ourselves a part of this complex ecosystem created by nature, must have the humility to be in equilibrium with nature. Ancients in all lands recognized this and worshipped nature. Presently, however, things have come to such a state that right here in Prashanti Nilayam, when I go out, I see most of the people looking down at their cell phones. And they walk that way, causing hazards to people and traffic. Now, everyone talks of the enormous connectivity that modern telecom has provided to us. And since we in radio side depend heavily on telecom technology, I would be the last person to deny its incredible utility. That said, we also seem to have reached a stage where tele-addiction has become a serious problem with many undesirable consequences of its own. I am bringing this up because if we are concerned about learning, education, how to take forward the EHV, Bal Vikas or whatever it is, we must first recognize the nature of these new phenomena confronting us and where exactly we must look in Swami's vast treasure trove of teachings to find the solution. Now it turns out that even as I was getting the script ready, the institute convocation took place and I had to take off for a couple of days to attend the university and birthday functions. The guest of honor during this year's convocation was Mr. Sam Pitroda, who is the advisor to the Prime Minister of India on public infrastructure and innovations. Unlike what most chief guests do, Sam Pitroda spoke extempore, finished his speech in exactly the time allotted, and kept everyone riveted to attention. And when he finished, Mr. Pitroda deservedly got a huge applause that was not born out of courtesy or politeness, but genuine appreciation. I was deeply impressed because you know how diverse the audience in Sai Kullanthal can be, especially during the birthday season. And yet, they all applauded Mr. Pitroda. Now, I am referring to Pitroda's speech because he made explicit and detailed reference to cell phones and their transformative influence on connecting people in India. Sam Pitroda spoke very persuasively and with genuine passion as well as conviction. Since it has direct relevance to what I started saying, I am going to break my talk here to allow you to listen to the audio of the convocation address of Mr. Pitroda. Please listen carefully.
I have the honor to request Mr. Sam Pitroda, the chief guest of today's convocation, to deliver the convocation address.
Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, Honorable Chancellor Justice Venkataraman, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sridhar Prasad, formal Vice Chancellors, Board of the Trustees, Management, Deans, faculty members, dear students, members of the media, family, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed a special privilege and honor for me to be here with you today to deliver 32nd convocation address. I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. I must say, I have delivered probably over 25 convocation addresses, but I never had a setting like this. It is overpowering, inspirational, emotional, peaceful, pleasant, and unbelievably quiet. This is my first visit to the institute and the university. I've been reading and hearing about it on and off for many years. But one of my colleagues who works with me, Vikas Bagri, who graduated from here with a degree in business MBA in 2008 and has been working with us for 5 years. He is an example of your ambassador. Very sincere, honest, hardworking, courageous, committed, willing to do everything, discipline that I see here, ability to analyze things, creativity, ethics, everything you can ask for, you see in him, and you all should be proud of the institution you have. You have a great institute with so many distinguished people. Before wearing this gown, we all were together in a small room, or big room, but a small group. And I was amazed to meet some of these distinguished people whom I have known for many, many years as part of my work in 80s. And I had no idea that they were all involved in this institute. So you are indeed lucky to have the right spirit, right talent of advisors and seniors, proper environment, ecosystem, and you are lucky to be graduating today. So first, my congratulations to all graduating students. I wish you best of the best in your journey forward, and I hope you make a substantial contribution not only to yourself, your family, your community, but also country and the world. I can't help but think of the day I graduated, looking at all these beautiful young faces. I graduated from college with a BS in physics just about 52 years ago. It seems like yesterday. I was out there sitting, not with your kind of discipline, unfortunately. Young, just coming out of the Indian independence movement fervor. I was born in 42. And Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel, and others were our role models. In those days, telephones were hardly available. In fact, I had never used telephone in my life before going to America in 64. I had never seen television in my life before going to America in 64. Life was pretty simple. Needs were very little and goals were very clear. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. To give you an example of how we all take different turns in life. And no matter how you plan, the journey turns out to be very different. Exciting, at times challenging, but everything you learn in colleges do add up to a lot of good experiences. I was born and raised in a small little village, tribal village in Orissa. My parents were Gujaratis, settled in Orissa. And our heroes were again Gandhi, Patel, Nehru and others growing up. In this village there were no schools. No water, no electricity, no phone, no doctor, no nurse, no nothing. My mother delivered 8 children, all 8 at home, 0 cost of delivery. All 8 out of 8 turned out to be mentally healthy, physically healthy, and all 8 went to America. Because then that was the way to get out of poverty. My father had 4th grade education. He was a carpenter. And his dream was to make sure that his children, like every Indian parents, do get good education. I must tell you, nowhere else in the world, parents spend so much time and energy and money and resources to educate their children than in India. So I got my BS, then I got my master's in physics, fell in love with a girl on the campus, and then read in the newspaper that President Kennedy has decided to send man onto the moon. I was young, energetic, little bit stupid, and I decided to go to America. I had no money, no support, didn't know anybody. So I found some money, borrowed some, and then took a boat from Mumbai to Genova, through Karachi, Aden, Port Said, Alexandria, Naples, Genova. Took a train from Genova to London, took a plane from London to New York, and took a bus from New York to Chicago. Never been there, never seen snow, didn't know what cold meant. And all of a sudden realized that ignorance is going to help. Went to college, and then I had gone to get a PhD in physics. When my professor told me that it takes 7 years to get a PhD, I had a girlfriend, my priorities had changed, and I decided to get a master's in electrical engineering because I could get that in 1 year. Did that, called her to America, got married. Started my life. Spent years calling my family one by one to America, putting them through college, working hard, built a business in 1974, sold the business in 79, and then came to Delhi in 1980, and I had never been to Delhi before. So I tried to make a phone call to my wife. And I tried, and I couldn't make a phone call. So fair amount of arrogance and lot of ignorance said, I'm going to fix this. If I had known everything I know today about India, I would have never even tried it. I learned that ignorance is a great asset. If you know too much, sometimes you back off. I went back to Chicago, told my wife, I'm going to spend 10 years fixing India's telephones. I didn't know how. I didn't know with whom. Then finally I had a chance to meet with Mrs. Gandhi. And that's where I met Rajiv Gandhi for the first time. And I could convince Mrs. Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi that telecom would change the face of this country. IT software will give us the resource we never had. But it will take 10, 15 years. We know we can do it. Give us a chance to do it. Mrs. Gandhi believed in technology. Rajiv was just about my age. And we clicked. And over a period of time, We became friends, and he gave me all the political will and support that I needed to do it. But I needed young people like you to get it done. Because without 500 young engineers, I couldn't do anything. So it required right kind of combination of political will, domain expertise, and young talent. Then we had 2 million telephones. It used to take 10 years to get telephone connection. Today we have 900 million telephones, and we are a nation of a connected billion. It is this complex country with the kind of diversity we have is now connected. For the first time in the history, we are connected people. Anyone can pick up phone from any corner of the country and talk to anybody else. It is a very powerful fabric that we have created for the unity of this country. It is for development of this country in a very different way. It cuts across all barriers: religion, languages, physical location, customs. This powerful tool now is going to be an instrument to build New India. And very few really understand the power of connectivity. I've been saying that the first phase of telecom revolution is over, but the second phase of telecom revolution is about to begin. So I worked here during Rajiv Gandhi's time for about 10 years. Then I had a heart attack, I had a quadruple bypass, and I basically ran out of money. I had worked for 10 years, I'd spent all my money, and when Rajiv Gandhi died, I basically lost my heart. I had to go back to pay for my children's tuition. I decided to go back to America, but by then I had given up my US nationality. So I had to go on a tourist visa. I went on a tourist visa, but I couldn't work there on a tourist visa. So I spent a lot of time restructuring my life. My mother was there, my father had died there. And no one in the family knew that I was completely broken. Broken in terms of heart, lost my friend, had no money, because everyone assumed that I was powerful, I had all that you needed, and no one could deal with the fact that it was all gone. But you needed inner strength to build again. So I always tell my friends, my highs are very high and my lows are very low. My roller coaster ride is unbelievable. I built the businesses, made money, and then in 2004, when I heard on television that Congress party did not do anything for 50 years, I felt insulted. I picked up phone and called Mrs. Sonia Gandhi and I said, I'm going to come campaign for the party because this is just not acceptable. We have done so much in India. The fact that we can feed 1.3 billion people today on our own is a great accomplishment by our agricultural scientists. We are a nuclear power. We just sent a mission to Mars. We are the largest producer of milk in the world. We have eradicated polio. We don't have guinea worm. And millions of our children can go to college and schools. And you tell me we didn't do anything? Just not acceptable. So then I decided to come back, worked on the National Innovation Advisory Council with Mrs. Gandhi, had opportunity to work on National Knowledge Commission, and then decided to focus on building public information infrastructure to really democratize information. Because I am convinced that the poverty today is poverty of information. If we can empower our people with knowledge, education, information, they will figure it out on their own. Don't underestimate the power of people in rural India. Don't underestimate the knowledge of our young. We have not been able to give them tools.
To an extent, Gandhiji's dream of Ram Rajya was not possible because we didn't have the tools and the internet. Internet and web has changed everything. It has changed business models, delivery systems. It is changing governance, education, health, agriculture, banking. Almost everything we do today is basically obsolete. Everything we do needs to be done differently, keeping in mind internet, keeping in mind new technology. So when government introduced right to information, I believe that was the biggest decision in the history of India. Very few people understand the power of right to information. By introducing right to information, we said we are going to empower every human being in this country. It will take time. It will take probably 10 years, 20 years. But the process is on. Whenever you introduce an instrument like that, it takes time to settle. It creates confusion. People misuse. People abuse. We have right to information, but we don't have information organized in a manner it can be used. So our job is to really organize information. So we are creating two major networks. One called Knowledge Network to connect all our universities, R&D institutions, ultimately libraries and others, with 40 gigabit bandwidth to transfer large amount of information. So our scientists can collaborate better, share resources, and expedite research and development. Second network is to connect 250,000 local panchayats to optical fiber. When that happens, all our villages would have huge amount of broadband capacity. These two networks will cost us about 50,000 crores. Government has approved funding. We are building it. First one is already built. Second one will be built in next 18 months. In addition, we are creating platforms for ID that Nandan Nilekani is working on. For GIS, Dr. Kasturirangan, Dr. Ramaswamy, Dr. Nayak are working on. Applications, Dr. Garola, where information on food distribution, Narega, driver's license, passport, income tax, all would be organized. We are computerizing 32 million court cases because it takes 15 years to get justice today. We need to organize and computerize police, CBI, prisons. All of this work is going on. And then people say, not much is happening. Indian conversation today is rubbish. It is all about cricket, Bollywood, and political gossip. We need to change that conversation to things like this. We need to really take this lead forward to talk about Indian values, Indian customs, indigenous development. A nation of 1.3 billion can't be doing nothing. There are lots of good people in this country doing lots of good work. They don't get any recognition. It is time to change the conversation in this country. And young can do that, and you need to take the lead. I get disappointed when young in India don't demand change. You are the constituency who should be demanding change. But you are not demanding change. You put up with the way things are. So when this public information infrastructure is built in maybe 2-3 years, at the cost of about 100,000 crores, education will change completely. And a lot of education institutions don't want to recognize that. I've been saying that I really don't need teacher to deliver content and create content. Content is already created by best of the best in the world. It's available on the net. And today I need teacher to be a mentor. But none of our teachers are trained to be mentor. Similarly, the delivery of health services, delivery of government services, all of this is going to change drastically in a very short period of time. And you need to be the agent of change. You need to innovate. You need to think differently, recognizing that information brings about openness, accessibility, connectivity, networking, democratization, decentralization, and as a result, social transformation. We are at a tipping point in India, believe me. If we don't take care of next 10 years, we are headed for a disaster. Next 10 years are going to be the most critical years in the history of India, mainly because of the potential of technology and the energy in our young. Technology today, not just IT, biotech, nanotech, stem cell research, alternate energy, gives you a whole different way of doing things. But that requires young talent. That requires new minds. Because today in India, systems are basically designed to promote perk, privilege, patronage. It is not designed for productivity, performance, processes. And we need to change that. We cannot go on protecting the old system with old guards. That phase is over. They did a great job. With great respect, we need to move on. It is good to look at history to gain strength and perspective. But it is wrong to get stuck in the past. It is time to look forward and not look backward. World is looking to India to provide leadership because the Western models based on consumption are not scalable, sustainable, desirable, workable. India needs to provide new model of development to the world. India needs to really lead the growth. We must continue to grow at the rate of 8 to 10%, and we must focus on bottom of the economic pyramid. We must lift 400 million below poverty line, and we must build inclusive society. Society where everyone has a place. Everyone is equal. Everyone is respected. And we have been doing that. We have been living with it for centuries. And we cannot come up with ideas to divide our systems. And that's where young have to play an important role. So we need to innovate. How do we innovate in a system like this? So we created National Innovation Council, sectorial councils, state level councils. We are creating $1 billion fund. We are going into clusters. But then the innovation is not about products, markets, services. It is not just about globally competitive marketplace. It is about innovations in governance, innovations in lifestyle, innovations in education, innovations in health. Everywhere I look around, I see a great need to change the paradigm. And I get upset when people don't welcome change. Everyone in India tells you why it can't be done. Everyone takes great pride in identifying a problem. You don't need talent in India to identify a problem. Nor do you need talent to suggest solutions. You really need courage and talent to go get it done against all the odds. Dr. Kurian, when he started work on milk, didn't wait for anybody. He just went and did it. Took him 40 years. All of these things that focus on nation building require long commitment. Nothing happens for less than 20 years. All my business colleagues, I tell them, you are building a company, we are building a nation. Building a nation is very complex, very different. Requires different kind of parameters, different mindset. Building a company is easy. Productivity, efficiency, cost reductions, rules and regulations, and boom, you can do it. Our task is very complex, and our collective task, when I say our task, I mean you all, is to build a very strong, secular, united nation which gives direction not only to India, but to the world. World is looking and world is interested in India's development. How do we get everybody to rally? But if we can't put our own house in order, how do we get everybody to rally? So we feel when you look at the media that everything is falling apart. Morals are going down, Work ethics are bad. Everybody is stealing everything. Rich are becoming richer. Poor are not being paid attention to. And it's a chaos, confusion, contradictions. But then you look at the young and the tools and technology. You see great hope. You feel we can change the face of this country in 20 years if we just turn it over to young. And that is the requirement of the day. So when I see a lot of these graduate students, my message to them is build very strong self. Build self that is going to serve people. But first you got to serve yourself. If you can't serve yourself, you can't serve anybody. So get a good job, work hard. There is no substitute for hard work. Look beyond your personal interest to community interests and really create hope. This morning I had an interesting opportunity to meet the father of your Vice Chancellor, Shashidhar Prasad's dad, Javare Goida, or I can't pronounce the name properly. He's 100 years old. And he came to have breakfast with us. Full of energy, could hear, talk, think, discuss. And he said, Mr. Pitroda, I read your report from the National Knowledge Commission. And when you recommended mission on translation, I was thrilled. 100-year-old man talking not about past, but talking about future. This is the India we need to recognize and celebrate. He had no complaints, was no negative, and he gave me joy. He made me feel that there is hope. I think there are lessons to learn from so many different interesting people in our society. But they don't get the kind of exposure in the public. Some actor will get an exposure. Some cricket player will get an exposure. These are the heroes of India. I know my time is up. I was given 30 minutes. It's just about 30 minutes. So once again, I want to wish you all graduating students best of the best. I want to thank all the parents for encouraging their children to go to this institute. I want to thank you for your support to your children. I want to thank all of the teachers and professors and members of the board for giving support and direction to this institute. And finally, really genuinely thank you from bottom of my heart for giving me this opportunity and this great platform to have a conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
That was a nice talk, wasn't it? It was extempore, very well delivered, and straight from the heart. No wonder it was also well received. Presently, I shall come to the reason for making Pitroda's talk a part of mine. But before I do that, there are two things I need to mention. First is that after the speech of the guest of honor, the current Chancellor, Justice Venkataraman, who by the way was earlier the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, made a few remarks. Basically, he quoted the Upanishads and advised students to follow the self within. Following that, there was a short clip from one of Swami's benedictine addresses, that is to say, a convocation discourse. That message, as also the clip played on birthday, both had very similar messages to which I now wish to make a reference. Now, if you go carefully through Bhagavan's various discourses, and as some of you may be aware, a good bit of our job here makes us do that as a part of our work. In almost all his discourses, and indeed in the countless letters Swami wrote, and in private conversations too, Swami's wavelength or Shruti, if I may put it that way, always had the following notes. 1. God the Absolute always is. He is not only eternal and changeless, but also has all the attributes we normally associate with virtues. 2. When God created the universe, He became immanent in it totally and at 3 levels, the causal, the subtle, and the gross. 3. While these 3 aspects may not be evident to us, and they are not evident because our awareness is generally tied exclusively to the senses, while God's immanence may go unnoticed by us, it does not mean that it is absent. 4. In other words, although Swami repeatedly drew attention to God's omnipresence in the universe, in fact at 3 distinct levels, almost all of us hardly bother about it. 5. That in turn leads to a strong disconnect between the individual and the different entities in the universe, which is where all problems start. The example of killing the snakes and birds is one of this disconnect. Hopefully I shall go into all that in future talks. But for now, let me relate the above to the remarks of Mr. Pitroda. His observation that 900 million cell phones in the country have not only exponentially increased person-to-person connectivity, but also the access to internet is well taken. The quantum leap in connectivity, Pitroda added, has been a huge game changer and represented a massive leap forward in empowerment. That point also is well made and well taken. That said, I would like to add a caveat, if I may, which is the following. Telecom connectivity, while very helpful, largely connects one mind to another, facilitating the exchange of information, ideas, etc. What is more important than teleconnectivity is the connectivity of hearts, because without it, teleconnectivity by itself cannot and will not ever contribute much. This point is often missed by advocates of social change, and so let me elaborate a bit, which I shall do by referring to a few events in the Middle East. I apologize for treading into realms normally considered to be politics, but if I do so, it's merely to cite an example as also to make my point. A few years ago, there were in Iran as well as in Egypt certain events that brought many people into the streets to register protest. According to Western media, in both cases, it was a triumph of people empowerment brought about by phone connectivity. Maybe, but if I recall correctly, during the French Revolution, people came out into the streets in large numbers and even stormed the Bastille. And back then, there were no cell phones. So my first point is that if discontent is very high, it automatically triggers protest, which is sometimes massive. Indeed, this precisely is what happened in Tunisia, which is where the Arab Spring began. The cell phone might have been used in Tunisia, but I do not recall people making the case that teleconnectivity drove the Tunisian revolution. Secondly, let us say there is large-scale public discontent and that social media unites people regarding some issue or the other, etc. But does merely rising in anger and revolt help to solve the problem? I do not think so. Consider 2 issues that hog the headlines here for quite a while, namely corruption and what is often referred to as rape culture. People have marched, shouted slogans, signed petitions, went on hunger strikes and made any number of suggestions to solve these 2 problems. Has it produced any significant or meaningful change? Hardly. Why? Because the solutions were all superficial. It is strange that no one thought of going to the root of the problem. I shall not spend time doing that, but go straight to the only solution available, which, by the way, was given by Swami a long time ago. At the risk of repeating myself for the nth time, where n is a large number, Swami's solution is beautifully simple and has just 2 points. And they are the following. 1. The end of education must be character. And 2. Without individual character, there cannot ever be national character. Now, people may criticize me for being naive, but I strongly beg to differ. Education, along with learning, is the key, and sadly these days no one is taking responsibility for this. At home, parents have no time to guide their children. Nuclear family being the new fashion, grandparents nowadays tend to live alone. If by chance the grandparents live with their grandchildren, the grandchildren would be immersed in their own world of texting, social media, and etc., and couldn't be bothered in the least to learn about values from their elders. This leaves the grandparents alone, and often they end up watching TV all the time. Whatever it is, middle-class lifestyle has diminished direct personal connectivity within the family, which is where value education and sustenance must begin. What about schools? Where schools are concerned, thanks to market forces, they now focus mainly on results. Indeed, the very notion that schools should be the cradles for character development has long vanished. Thus, values take a silent beating in the schools also. Add to all this the corrosive nature of the media, which is not only full of negativity, but also not shy of unapologetically promoting vulgarity and obscenity. I am well aware that polite people would dismiss me as an old fuddy-duddy, while those accustomed to using stronger language would relentlessly pour sarcasm and contempt on me. I am least bothered, and as a response would merely cite what Swami has said not once but 1,000,000 times. It is not for nothing that for decades Swami insisted on starting every discourse with the word Divyatma Swarupalara, meaning embodiments of the divine Atma. This was not a mere greeting, but a reminder that verily our nature is divine and that our feelings, thought and behavior must reflect that intrinsic nature of ours. In later years, Swami switched to Prema Swarupalara, which means embodiments of divine love, which implied that selfless love must be the basis of all our thoughts, words and deeds. Why? Because God is love and love is God. And it is to remind us of that profound truth, we were also asked to sing the bhajan beginning with the words Prem Ishwar Hai, Ishwar Prem Hai. Keep this in mind while I return to the issue of corruption and rape. Let us ask the question. If a person identifies with the spark of the divine within, which by the way was what Swami wanted us to do, would that person ever be involved in corruption? The short answer is never. Typically, what happens in a corruption case is that the giver of the bribe wants something done in a hurry, which the concerned official is not willing to do, even though it is his or her duty to do so, and is in fact paid a salary to do precisely that duty. The problem gets solved when the one wanting service pays some money to the one who is supposed to be the service provider. One party gets the job done fast, while the other is happy about making a fast buck. In fact, this is the reason company people use the term speed money instead of the more distasteful sounding word bribe. Many are now beginning to say, listen, this is inevitable in the society we live in. Others go to the extent of saying that the age of dharma is all over and that it is no longer possible to be dharmic. Seriously. Yes, at a certain level things may seem that way, very difficult. However, when everybody ducks, corruption soon becomes a cancer, at which point everyone wails loudly, will somebody please do something? Here precisely is where Swami's teachings become vitally relevant. If we go back to the Gita on which Swami has spoken so many times, the war, as Krishna emphatically reminded Arjuna, was all about fighting for dharma. And it is to teach Arjuna that dharma was verily God that almost the very first teaching Krishna gave Arjuna was, Arjuna, do you know that you are verily an embodiment of the Atma? What was told to Arjuna applies to each and every one of us, which Swami made absolutely clear more than once. Essentially, he said that all of us must come together to form Team Dharma and wage war against evil. Cancers like mass corruption and rape culture represent existential threats, and just as the ordinary people of Stalingrad fought bravely alongside with Soviet soldiers against invading Nazi troops unmindful of the brutal Russian winter, we too must wage war against adharma. And that war is not to be fought with weapons or marching in the streets, but by first transforming ourselves and then doing all we can to help others transform likewise. In other words, adharma must be smothered by the growing power of dharma. To put it differently, darkness must be removed by allowing the divine light in every heart to shine brightly. Life today is such that it is easy to give excuses, the obvious one being lack of time. Everybody says, I have no time. But what is time? It is verily the stuff life is made of. And let us not forget, life in the human form has been gifted to us by God. Indeed, it is to stress that Swami often told us, Jantunam Narajamnam Durlabham, meaning that life with the human form is a rare gift. People who say they do not have time, nevertheless do seem to have time to regularly check emails, update their Facebook page, socialize, take vacations, and so on. But time for Swami and his teachings, somehow that seems to be a different matter. Dear listener, it's very easy to deceive ourselves with all kinds of excuses. But if we care to search deep in our hearts and reflect on how much of his time Swami gave for us for shaping and transforming ourselves, we would realize that the avatar came only for us and to save humanity through us. Exactly as he did when he came earlier as Krishna, Swami effectively said, this non-violent fight against adharma through mass transformation is your task. I will do all I can to coach you, but ultimately the job has to be done by you. If we find ways of justifying our non-involvement while constantly lamenting, Swami, why have you gone as leaving us orphaned? It will only be a way of hiding from the inconvenient truth. And that truth is that pushing out adharma with dharma is our job, and we cannot expect someone else to do it. Many tell me I am all wrong and that it is Swami who will make the golden age happen. Absolutely. And Swami alone can make that happen. That said, it is the Swami in the heart of every one of us who will have to make it happen, who will make it happen. If we shut our hearts and conveniently duck that inconvenient truth, expecting Swami somewhere else to do the job, then we would be indulging in fantasy and mere self-delusion. Mercifully, most devotees are not of that genre. So why don't we, to start with, think actively about helping people to tone up education wherever we can and in whatever way we can. This series is meant mainly to promote that conversation so that together we generate a critical mass of people who would actively get involved in revitalizing EHV and Bal Vikas education. I would be grateful if people write in hundreds, if not larger numbers, offering suggestions about how we may go about it. Thank you for your patience. Offering this talk at the lotus feet of our beloved Swami.